Know me, my name is Rusty Harder. I'm Director of Movement Competition with the CGA. So for those of you I know, it's great to see you again. And those I don't know, I look forward to seeing you on the golf course this year and in the future. First, I want to recognize Chris Wolf. He's our Senior Tournament Manager and handles all of our volunteer rules officials. He put together this entire program today, so I want to thank him. And I'd like to recognize our staff that's here and that you'll see on the golf course this year. I think I can see all of them there. Sitting beside Jason Cox, who is no longer a staff member with us, but Tori Johnson, she's the Junior Tournament Manager. Behind Jason, Tom Roth, the Tournament Manager. Brandon Hood, Assistant Director of Junior Golf. Killian Casson is Tournament Manager. Hogan May's in the corner. He's also a tournament manager and handles our interclub program. Jack Nance, our executive director there. Soon Maggie Watts is around the corner, our director of women's golf. And Chris Zay, who if you haven't heard talk, you're going to hear him in just a little bit. Did I hit all of our staff that's here today? All right. Well, thanks again, everybody. And I'll turn it over to Chris Wolf and we'll get going.
Thank you, Rusty. We'll get started with a theme that you'll hear a lot this afternoon. Like I said earlier, just a big thank you to all of you for all of the time, effort, travel, everything that goes into what you do for not just the CGA, but South Carolina Golf Association, college golf, high school golf. We're very lucky to be able to put on such a big program for all the golfers in the Carolinas, and could not be able to do that. We would not be able to do that without all of your help. So appreciate putting in time and effort to come last night and or today, and thank you in advance for all your time for this year. So we'll go over a little bit about expectations and what the CGA provides for you all when you're at our tournaments. So our expectations are to be a professional, and you're a lot of times the player facing representative of the CGA. There's a lot of times where we don't see the players that are on the course until they come into scoring, or sometimes we didn't see any of the players on the course when we're running around doing other things. And oftentimes you all are the starter. You see them on the course when they have a rule situation. You see them for pace of play. Sometimes you see them for scoring. So we have players that they don't even realize you guys are volunteers sometimes. They think you're on staff because you're the only one that they see out on the course. So we just ask that you're always that professional and how you communicate with them, how you present yourself. And we talked about the uniforms, and then we'll talk a little bit later about communication and working your way through sometimes awkward situations that you find yourself out on the course. So as you went through registration this morning, if you haven't before, or if you needed a refresh, we have a shirt, hat, name badge, and all the books that you could possibly read about the rules of golf. If anything comes up during the year that you need a new one, something gets broken, lost, whatever, just let me know, and we'll get that out to you at your next tournament. We do a thank you gift every year. It's good to be back in person, so we can just hand those out instead of the order mail thing that we've been doing the last couple of years. So I'm very happy to get back to the handing out of the gift. One note about the license plate this year, we were kind of joking about it, is not for use on your car. You probably put it on there, I think it would get destroyed pretty quickly. That is a design for on the wall, something like that. So that's joke. People started to think we're serious. But I hope you enjoy that. Something new, something that I don't think you have before. Hope you enjoy that. So we'll get into signing up for tournaments in a little bit. But we always, the official in charge is we'll be reaching out to you for each tournament that you sign up. We like to do 3 to 7 days in advance of the tournament with the committee assignments and our plan for the day. Especially when it gets into the height of summer, we start to push the 3-day side of that window. I apologize for that. If it gets down to less than that, let me know. Just send me an email, and I will get in touch with whoever always use email, but just know we get very busy in the summer. It's not that we forgot about you. It's not that the qualifying got canceled or anything like that. Just in over our heads for that moment. One thing we'd like to continue to push is our rules official Facebook group. We got some really good discussion going last year. I tried to put in some, most of them end up being PGA Tour situations, something where there's video and discussion to talk about interesting or sometimes controversial rules situations that come up. And if you have things that don't feel like you have to wait for CGA staff member to be the one to start those discussions or lead those discussions. If you see something that comes up on TV or at one of your tournaments, please feel free to put that into the group and get the discussion started that way. It's a good resource for us. It's easy to do when you're on the course, talk about rules, and then you are at the club if you have a group that can talk about it. But this kind of served as another place for us to talk about the rules and keep ideas like that. And interesting situations always helps me to remember rule situations like that. If you like, your expenses for when you're working CGA tournaments are tax deductible. We do not directly reimburse for your travel. We always provide lunch. We always try to keep you fed and plenty of soda and coffee. We usually have a tab going at the turnhouse, grill room, whatever the case may be for your tournament. We always have our annual rules training seminar like this one. And we always try and provide you as much and as early information on USGA training that comes out. Make sure you get access to that. We have special study resources available on our website that on the CarolinesGolf.org rules officials tab. A lot of good study resources. A few new websites actually started up this past year that have good quizzes that are helpful for leading up to rule school. So we're still not able to offer special golf tournament entry privileges. I hope we had a decent number of people be able to play golf over at Pine Wild the last couple of days, and we're thankful to Pine Wild for offering up that. But we can't offer you a free tournament entry or anything like that. Too complicated on the bookkeeping side. So this past year we did introduce a rules official incentive program that I hope you enjoyed. The landscape for rules officials has changed dramatically over the last few years. Many of our quote unquote competitors are offering either stipends for the day, travel stipends, and we understand that no one is getting rich off of this by any means, but if it comes down to a situation where you're losing money versus you're breaking even, we don't want you to feel like you have to go work someplace else. We want the best rules officials at our tournaments and making our tournaments as good as possible. So we introduced these 3 levels of tournament days worked and had quite a good turnout this past year, and hope that works well for those of you that qualified. Something that we're going to use going forward, and I hope more and more of you are in one of those windows, or if you're already in one of them, keep moving up. So for each tournament, we ask that you be timely and attend the tournaments that you have signed up for. We understand though that things always come up. If you have signed up for something and life gets in the way, it's not a problem. Please do not. You don't need to apologize or anything like that. Just let the official in charge know as soon as you can. If you've already gotten the committee assignments for that tournament, that something's come up, the easiest way is just to reply to that email and let us know. We'll also talk about for multi-day tournaments or for tournaments that are one day and you can only work some of the day, which is perfectly fine. Just let us know in advance of that. We would rather have you all there for half a day or for 1 out of the 4 days or 2 out of the 4 days, whatever the case may be. Just let us know when we can expect you and do everything you can to be there at that time. Like I said, you're being the face of the CGA for a lot of the players. To be dressed neatly and present yourself in a professional manner. Our uniform for men is a white CGA shirt, a CGA hat, and khaki, navy, or gray pants. And we ask for no shorts for men. And women, the white CGA shirt, CGA hat, khaki, navy, or gray pants, shorts for sports, and shorts are okay for women. So we have a good visual of that. If you have any questions, just don't hesitate to let me know or to reach out to me throughout the year. So this is fine, whatever the case may be. But we appreciate you wearing the uniform and being that face of the CGA. One of the past couple of years, especially, it's become more and more difficult for us to do our scheduling. The popularity of golf is great for golf. It makes it hard for us to actually find courses to run our qualifiers. So one thing we wanted to reiterate is always be courteous to host facility staff. We've never had an issue with this by any means, but something that can only help us when in the future, when at the end of the year, when clubs are trying to figure out which tournaments they're outside tournaments they're going to have. Any little thing can help us, and if the reminder that we leave with the CGAs is that everyone was so nice, that they treated us so well. We would love to have them back. It can go a long way towards helping us get more and then better host sites for next year. The official in charge, like I said, will send out committee assignments and anything kind of course specific or that tournament specific. Please do everything you can to listen to those assignments. Those do tend to change from time to time, and maybe we'll trade roles with somebody at some point. But for the most part, do whatever you can to listen to what those original assignments were. And we are a committee. It's called the committee for a reason, to work as much as you can within the team framework. We have our radios out there, which we'll talk more a little bit about later, but use those radios, communicate as much knowledge and information that we can share. Makes it a better experience for the players and run the tournament at the high level we want to do that. So we got, probably should all, so we talked about the rules resources. This is our rules officials landing page. Our schedule, which is now fully on there, is up at the top link to make it easy for you all. We have our training seminars, which you've already found. And then the information below that is for when you're first signing up, and then the CGA resources and USGA resources can be a big help for you with studying and furthering education. So the schedule, when you click through, we'll give you a list. It looks very much like a tournament sign up. We basically copied the tournament sign up format, and you'll sign up for the tournaments that you can help out. Do whatever you can to. You can either have the choice. You can sign up closer to each tournament if you prefer to wait a little while longer. Some people like to just go through and fill out their entire year, so they know where they're going to be. Whichever is best for you. And you can access all of your signed up tournaments in your Golf Genius profile. You can look back, and you'll also get a confirmation email for each of them as you sign up, so you'll have that for you. You got some statistics from not 2023, 2022 statistics. We had 113 officials work a total of 689 tournament days. So like I said, we could not do everything that we do without those 689 days that you all gave us. We had 18 officials work 10 or more tournament days, which was our baseline level for that incentive program. And got the gold, silver, and bronze medals. Coming in third, I think he's here. We got David Kale, 21 days worked. In second place, we had Joe Farmer with 23 days worked. And he's not here. He's going to be in Colombia. Ben Moffitt defended his title. So like you said, if you please do not feel like you need to work 21 days or anything next year, we appreciate whatever time you can give. We understand everyone's situation is a little bit different, but whatever you can give, we appreciate it. go through real quick about registering to officiate for a tournament. So you're using that Golf Genius account that you've already created. You, like I said, can register for one or multiple events at once. That entire schedule is there. You'll get a confirmation email, and there's step-by-step instructions, or just reach out to me. I'm happy to walk you through it. And again, this year we're going to do the Carolinas Amateur Championship by invitation only, and we'll get to work on that soon and reach out to people who we'd like to have on that committee. I want to talk real quick about the Senior Rules Officials Program. A good number of people here who are a member. So annually, I guess weekly, we receive requests from outside groups, Peggy Kirk Bell Tour, College Golf, the NC High School Athletic Association, all kinds of different groups that are requesting rules officials for their tournament. So we created this optional program. So optional is underlined as a sort of a certification program, so that if you are accepted into this program, we send out all of those requests that we get from outside groups. So it varies by organization that's making the request. Some pay stipends, some pay lunch, whatever. Some have lodging available. All kind of all vary. They're spread out all over North and South Carolina. But again, this program is not a requirement. It's completely optional, and we just set it up so that it's a way for us to kind of standardize the rules officials that we're comfortable recommending out to the various organizations. And we currently have 42 senior rules officials. So appreciate all the extra work that you're doing for those other organizations. If you're interested, you can let me know. There's a entry form or a application on that rules officials webpage. We have a couple of different ways to qualify. You need a USGA Rules of Golf workshop to attend, and then also score a 75 or higher on the 100 question test, or a 70 or higher on the 80 question test, and have worked 5 CGA tournament days. So CGA includes CGA events, TIGA events, and all USGA qualifiers in North and South Carolina to count towards your 5 days. And have attended a CGA Rules Officials Training Seminar for the last 4 years, which everyone checks off today. The other way to do it is to be a member of a USGA committee and have scored 90 or higher on the 100 question Rules of Golf exam. And like I said, if you're interested, there's an application form on the Rules Officials website. You can fill that out, send it over to me, send me a copy of your exam score. There's no cost to apply, and optional. Again, don't feel like you're obligated to do it by any means. All right, with that, I will hand it over to Mr. Brandon Hood.
Hello, good afternoon, everybody. For those, I see a lot of familiar faces, but for those that I've not had the pleasure of meeting yet, my name is Brandon Hood. I'm the Associate Director of Junior Golf. And I know it's been expressed many times, but we are so extremely thankful for all of you. We can't do this without you. So thank you again for being here and everything you do this summer and throughout the year. I'm going to go over some duties as an official at our events. So first and foremost, you're a rules official going out there, giving rulings, pace of play monitor. That's huge. Just making sure no one's out there for 6 hours. We're keeping up the pace of play, getting people moving out there. Spotter. You never know where the golf ball is going to go. So making sure you're trying to stay ahead and looking out pretty golf balls that go in the woods, watching them in the penalty areas, so you can assist with stuff like that. Starter, we'll go over being a starter in a little bit, but starting the day off on the right foot, being a bright, positive face in the morning and getting everybody started and knowing their rules properly for the round. Or score. This is pretty rare, but sometimes if we'll ask you to sit in the scoring tent and gather score cards and keep score for everybody. Again, another rare one, course setup. If there's only one of us on site, we have a double T start, 90 players. We might ask you to go around, set tees on 1 to 9s, check the whole locations, make sure everything's set up with Jay. Playoff official, for those of you that work a lot of USGA events, I've never been to a USGA qualifier without a playoff. So we always ask one of you if you can help assist with the playoffs. Those are always huge. Evacuation of the course. This is huge in junior events because they don't have golf carts. So you might have 90 juniors out on the course. We need all hands on deck when we blow the horn, get everybody in safely. Match play referee. Towards the end of our match play tournaments, we'll assign a handful of officials to be referees to follow along with the match and then announce match score and stuff like that. Hogan will go over match play later this afternoon. And then now we're going to cover best practices of the rules official. Be firm and positive, but take plenty of time. And then the great Richard Tufts once said, a referee without pants is better equipped than a referee without a rules book. So just make sure you always have your rules book with you. Don't be afraid to use your rules book. I use mine all the time, even if I'm never virtually certain of the ruling, just double check. You can never be too sure. But if you have a question, just contact one of us, the official in charge on site, and we'll make sure we get the ruling correct. So you're a representative of the CGA while you're out there. So just trying to be professional at all times, of course. Players are under tension, they're stressed, they're trying to go low. Some are trying to get college scholarships, but it's a very stressful time for them. So we don't want to add to their stress. Don't threaten them, hopefully, but don't be too overly friendly. How can I help you? Smile, just try to be courteous and be as nice and helpful as you can. And if any major problems arise, just again, contact the CGA official in charge. We'll come out there, give a second opinion, do whatever needs to be done. Some more best practices. Station on the course to observe play. Be visible while being invisible. Hiding behind trees, but you can still see, you can still spot balls. Finding a nice spot on the golf course where you can see 4 or 5 points. You can monitor pace of play, see if there's anything going out there that players may need assistance with. And if you need to drive on the course, going backwards is always preferable. And keep that windshield up, balls are flying everywhere, so careful. And be careful coming around corners. You never know when you're going to ride around a blind turn and there's someone teeing off and then you start on them. So you don't want to do something like that. And don't creep along. If you're over by the putting green, you're creeping very slowly. You don't think you're making noise, but if someone putting and it's very quiet, they can hear you. It could be a distraction. It's just stay put, wait for them to hit the putt, and then you can go on. Try not to be in the line of sight, or if you're way out in the distance, you don't want to be an aiming point or be a distraction to someone teeing off. And try to park your cart beyond the driving zone. So you don't want to be right where the balls are flying. You don't want to have an effect on the golf ball. Essentially, be far enough away so you can see the ball, but also stay out of its way. Essentially, stay out of the landing zone. And of course, we encourage you all to assist players if you see a ball search going on. Just make sure you start your stopwatch so we can get the proper 3 minutes. But we definitely ask you help looking for golf balls out on the course. And sometimes the player does not want to find their original ball. They hit it deep in the woods. They say, and they play a provisional. They don't want that first ball to be the ball in play. So just make sure you ask something like, "Do you want me to help you look for that?" Or, but they'll be sure to tell you, stay away. Don't find that one. So we ask you not to approach the player, but there are exceptions when asked. So to prevent them from incurring a penalty, you see them about to do something they're definitely not allowed to, and they're taking 2 club lengths from a yellow penalty area or something like that. Go up, try to stop them. Any penalty you observe, assume the players are playing by the rules unless you see otherwise. Pace of play reasons. This is a lot of the time why we have to talk to the player. You guys are 2 holes behind. Can we pick it up a little bit? 40 seconds per shot, ready golf. Let's go, guys. And if a player looks lost, sometimes Don Ross courses, a lot of tees are next to greens. You can go to the wrong tee for sure by accident. Such as if anyone looks lost, make sure you point them in the right direction. You should park several yards away from players. So when you drive up, you don't want to drive up right on top of them. You want to stop a few yards short, so you can walk out, smile, be friendly. You don't just want to just drive in and be like, yeah, that's 2 strokes, and then drive off.
Drive by.
Yeah, just depending on the situation and what really is required, just call it in on the radio before you tell the player a wrong answer, essentially. Some radio etiquette, radio discipline. Use your radio to report, confirm any rulings with a CGA official, say, call in for pace play reasons. We had a ruling on hole number 4, took a while. This group's going to be a little bit behind, something like that. Keep radio with you out all times with an earpiece. Keep conversations concise, not essential radio chatter. Someone's trying to call in a ruling and you're talking about what's for lunch. That's not very helpful. So anytime you call it in, just saying where you are, who it's for, kind of describing the situation. Relay info if needed, if people cannot be reached on the radio. With the repeater system, there is a delay, so you just need to hold down the button, wait a couple seconds, then talk, since the radio transmission's a little wonky with the repeater from time to time. And be mindful of other radio locations. A lot of times we'll give one to the pro shop, they'll have it on full blast. They don't want me talking about, man, the bunkers out here, it's just terrible. In the pro shop right over here, that's not a good look for us for sure.
Might be true.
It might be true, but we'll keep it off air. In some areas with radio limited radio coverage, we may use Zello. We use it a couple times in the winter. Works pretty well for a phone app. You can use your headphones. I think we'll get into that a little bit more later, but definitely a possible option for this year. A good rules official is someone who checks their ego at the door, but they have the confidence to give proper rulings, of course. Always willingness to learn, as you all are. Great job, thank you. Ready to learn. And just a great demeanor on the golf course, smile, just representing the CGA, making sure you're happy and friendly with everybody. Can speak clearly, people, and conveying information. You're not always going to give someone a favorable ruling. So just make sure you're giving information, good and bad, concisely. Accuracy is the key. We don't want to give any wrong rulings out there. Accuracy is number 1 thing, like I was saying earlier. Use your rules book, use all your resources, other officials, official in charge, whatever you need to do, just make sure we get the ruling accurate. Practice preventative officiating. So if you're a starter, you see the ball teed up outside the teeing area, don't wait for them to tee off and then tell them and then give them a penalty and be like, hey, you're teed up outside the tee markers. So we're not trying to hunt them down and give them a penalty. We're trying to prevent penalties. Order of play, that will become important in match play. Stroke play not as much anymore with ready golf, but being mindful of that. Announcing and marking procedural requirements. If they need to mark their ball to check, to make sure they do mark, stuff like that. When cleaning is not permitted. When ball marker has not been returned to its original position, if you happen to notice that on the green, something like that, they measure their 2 club lengths or the club head to get their ball marker out of someone's line. You see they didn't move it back, just trying to prevent them from incurring a penalty there. But it's not our job to hold their hands all the way around the course, micromanage, make sure they do everything properly. How to interact with people on the golf course. Most people are pleasant, but most of you that come to a junior event will come across a couple parents. They think they know all the rules better than you do. They might not take things as common. So just try not to become upset or frustrated with anyone that's frustrated with you. That's not going to solve any problems. Everyone's just getting mad at each other. Sometimes just walking away, recomposing yourself, best way to handle the situation. And sometimes it takes thick skin. You get a two-stroke penalty, they're not going to be happy about it most of the time. Like, well, that's a dumb rule. Why is it that way? Well, it's the rule. Sorry, and it might cheat out, but it's just part of officiating. Yeah, you're going to find yourself in awkward situations all the time about giving out penalties that players might find unjust. That's just unfortunate. But again, like I've been saying, you're representing the CGA while you're out there, since you're trying to put the best face forward. Making a ruling. So we're going to make sure we get all the facts straight before we make any ruling. A lot goes into rulings, like who's involved, agreeing to facts, what players saw. Be wary of rules requested few or no facts. Say, tell me what happened and listen. Just try to get the players to walk you through every little detail, because as we know, golf, the rulings can come to very minor details. So making sure you get all the information you can before making a ruling. That's part of making as accurate of a ruling as possible. Make sure you have all the facts. So little sample ruling, my ball moved. It's a one-stroke penalty, right? Not a lot of information there. So when we walk up, we need to find out more information. Who is involved? What caused the ball to move? Is it you? Is it something else? Outside influence, natural force, what have you? Where were you? Where did the ball go? Just finding out all the facts before we make a ruling. And then approaching players in penalty situations always can be a little awkward. Just immediately, again, like we were saying before, you make a ruling, getting all the facts, consult your rule book if you need to. Show the player in the rule book, this is what it says, this is why it is the way it is. Inform the player of any options, penalty areas, A, B, and C. In fact, a lot of their just making sure they know all of their proper options before they proceed. And then once the ball is back in play, just leave so the player can continue around. Don't follow them shot by shot for the rest of the hole, and then tell them what they got at the end. So just a quick few do's and don'ts. Do reference your rules book. Always call ahead to the head rules official if you need to. Take advantage of rule 20.1C. Maggie will go over that at the end, but the good old two-ball rule. Ask players if they like help searching. Again, they might not want help searching for their golf ball, because once that ball is found, it's now back in play. They might not want that ball in play. And then leaving the area if possible after making a ruling, and keeping your cart out of the line of sight, line of vision, just not being a distraction further on down the hole. And then, of course, the don'ts. Don't argue with players about a ruling. Don't look for a player breaching a rule. Don't try to. We're not trying to rope around and get players penalties. We're trying to be an assistance. Don't suggest one option, but you can kind of nudge them in the right direction. Be like, these options aren't really possible here. Back of the line might be your only option, something like that. Approach the player to give a ruling unless it's obvious you are needed. So if you see they're on the cart path and they've got it covered, but you just drive up there anyway and be like, you know what you're doing? Yeah, just take my club length and moving on. And don't wait for a player to break rule. Like the example earlier, if you see someone teed up outside the markers, you're just sitting there waiting for him to hit the ball so you can give him that quick penalty. Try not to do that, or please don't do that. And then do not make ground under repair rulings without consulting an official in charge. A lot of players will ask, can I get relief for this? Just call in to the official in charge, saying I'm on the right side of 12, there's a bare area. You guys notice this? I believe it should be ground under repair. Just talking it through with the official in charge.
All right, everyone. For those of you that I haven't had a chance to meet yet, my name is Millian. It's nice to see you guys all here today. We're going to talk a little bit about some best practices when you guys are starting. So, like Chris Wolf said earlier, a lot of times the first person that people see from the committee is usually one of our rules officials on the first or 10th team. So a couple things, those starters really set the tone for the players. Really helps when you guys have a good smile. welcoming, there to answer any questions, and just kind of be that first point of contact when people start coming up to the first tee. Always making sure that we're starting the players on time, established by the committee. We'll talk a little bit later about what to do if that time gets off, whether it's a delay on the first tee or someone doesn't show up on time. So first thing you're gonna do is distribute scorecards and special notices to the competitors. So if there are any special rules from that day, want to make sure we let them know. If there's preferred lives and like that. People are not too happy if they miss out on that one for a couple. So just want to make sure we're letting them know that in advance before they get started with their round. CGA, so whoever's the official in charge will provide starters notes for you. So you'll be able to have some reference points to kind of go back to when you're announcing them and giving them the rules for that day. They'll have some details about the day, whether there's lunch, scoring, where to go when they're done, things like that. Or any kind of details if they're taking carts, things like that. Also, we'll have you guys up there to answer any rules questions that the players might ask. Make sure to read the rule sheets, whether there's a local rule in play, no play zones. Unfortunately, some people don't read the rule sheet ahead of time, so it's always good to have the rules officials go over some of those key points when things are starting. If you guys need any assistance when you're up there, you can always call the CGA official in charge. So that should be the person that's been communicating with you via email ahead of the tournament as well as day of, and they'll be able to have more information for you in case you need it. And just any kind of day of questions that you might need once you're on the course. As a starter, make sure you wear an earpiece. Another thing players don't love is when they hear someone calling for a ruling over the radio in their middle of their backswing on the first tee. Not a great start. So if you don't have an earpiece that you were given from us, come find the official in charge or a staff member, and we'll make sure we get you guys hooked up so that there's no radio chatter that the players are hearing while they're swinging. CGA does not call groups to the tee, so the players are responsible for being at their starting tee on time. However, if a player is missing, we want to do what we can to get the player to the tee on time, whether it's calling over the radio or calling the official in charge. A lot of these people we see repeatedly, so we usually know what they look like, and the official in charge can go and try to find them on the range so we can keep pace of play moving and not get behind on that first tee. So like it says, just make sure you call them, make them aware. That way, if they get a call, maybe they forgot to cross it off. Could have been someone that withdrew last minute. So the official in charge can check their email or their voicemail and see if anyone's called ahead of time. That way we don't, again, get behind. So if the driving range or putting green is close by, you can call over to see if the player is there or ask the other players in the group if they have seen the missing player that morning. A lot of times, oh, he or she is just in the bathroom, or they know these players, they play with them a lot. And so they can say, oh, they're just getting something from their car, they'll be right over. And it helps just kind of ease the official's mind that's starting that day. Do not drive around looking for them. The rest of the group still needs to tee off on time. So again, just want to make sure we're not getting behind. You don't have to worry about chasing them down, running through the parking lot with your cart. So your job is just to stay on the first tee and go from there. So at the tee, when you get there, we will have a starting and a pairing sheet for you, official scorecards in starting time order. Sometimes we use digital scoring, which some of you have been able to help with, but if you have any questions about that, we'll help you get those set up. Sometimes there's a couple of troubleshooting issues that we run into, but we'll be able to help you get that set up. And if we can't communicate it over the radio, we can come and get them situated so that they can score on each hole. We'll also have pencils, a digital clock. That digital clock will stand as the clock that you guys are using for your starting time. So that is the official time for the tournament. Also notice the players and a local rule sheet. So we'll be able to give them their rule sheet for the day. A lot of times it goes to the back of or the bottom of their bag, but hopefully they read over it a little bit when you guys are going over it with them. Also have hole location sheets, some Sharpie markers in case they need to mark their ball. Tees, some sunscreen and bug spray, and a rules of golf book in case anyone wants to learn something on the first tee. The duties of the starter can be to give each player their own scorecard, make sure it has the right name and hometown or handicap, depending on what is happening or what kind of tournament it is. There's going to be no official scorecard in match play. However, a match play scorecard may be given at certain events to players for online scoring. So typically it'll be a code so that they can plug in who's up or down so that people can watch from home. Local rule sheets and a daily hole location sheet. Make sure you give one per team in a 4-ball event, so they don't need 2 copies, but just make sure everybody does have a copy so that they can refer back to that when they're out of course. Here is a little bit of an overview of Golf Genius. So in an effort to make some CGA championships and qualifiers a more enjoyable experience, we're asking one player in each group to live score during the qualifier and championship rounds. This helps our media team as well as our operations team know if they need to be ready for a playoff, leave some tees out. We try to encourage them to make sure they're plugging in those scores after each hole. That way, if there's any discrepancies, we can go through it when it's out there. We've run into a couple issues with scoring where they didn't plug them in. And so then you get to the end of the round and it's really hard to remember back to what you did on hole 1 when you played 4 hours out in the heat in the middle of July. So just want to make sure that we're staying on top of that when they're out there. In junior events, we do all digital scoring. So all information will be provided on the starter sheet and starters notes. For those of you that work a lot of junior events, you probably are pretty familiar with that. But again, if you have any questions, just let us know. Some more duties of the starter. You're going to be arriving to your assigned tee 20 minutes prior to first starting time, especially if you're taking over for someone. You want to make sure that transition is smooth. And if there's any questions you might have, you can go over that with the person that's already there. And just to make sure that if any of the players or participants or caddies have any questions, we're there. We always have someone that's available to answer questions. Also need to maintain an order on the first or 10th tee. So only players, caddies, or CGA officials on duty are to be in or around the starting area. There's a lot of spectators that like to come up there and search around the table, but you guys all do a great job of that. But just make sure we keep doing that so that we don't get too many other people in that area, and want to keep it as clear and orderly as possible. Do not delay a group because a competitor is late in appearing for his or her starting time. There's no need to ruin the whole pace of play because someone is late. We'll get that figured out, whether they're penalized or we can, depending on what the situation calls for, we'll get that taken care of. But just want to make sure that we are starting those that are there on time so that the day goes as quickly as possible. At events with caddy bibs, please note with players that which player was given a bib on the tee sheet to help with collecting them after the round. A lot of them seem to grow legs and walk away, so hopefully we can try to keep our eye on that and not lose as many this year. But you can just make a note on the starter sheet, give it to the official in charge or whoever's going to be scoring that day, and then they can check it back off when the person comes in for scoring to make sure we keep tabs on those a little more. We again want to make sure we're starting the group exactly at their assigned starting time. So if you fall behind, contact the official in charge to see about catching up on time. Sometimes it happens where someone has to come back and hit a ball. They just got a slow start. Someone was late, they had to catch up. Whatever the situation might be, call the official in charge and they'll get you guys back in order. We'll figure out a plan so that we don't fall further behind, but just let them know. So if a couple holes later, the next official on the committee is, they're sitting on hole 3 and all of a sudden this person or this group is 7 minutes behind. We want to know that they got off to a late start so that we can factor that into our pace of play for them and readjust. At events where carts are allowed, no more than 2 carts are allowed per group. So again, the official in charge will distribute this information to you, but a player and a caddy won't be riding in the cart at the same time while playing a hole. So they can ride together in between holes, especially if there's long walks, try to encourage that to keep them moving. But while they're playing the hole, only one of them can sit in the cart. They can decide that between themselves. But again, that's something the official in charge will help you guys know that information ahead of time. So if you are the starter, you know to look out for that. Pair up players and our caddies if necessary. So we don't want to have an abundance of carts out there. A lot of times we need a lot more carts than maybe the club really has extras of. So we want to make sure we're being as efficient with that as possible. Contact the official in charge if players are not willing to condense carts. Hopefully you don't run into this, but if there's anyone that seems to be giving you a hard time, we'll take care of that and get it sorted out with them. So a lot of them play enough stuff that they should know that, but for some reason you have some giving you a hard time, we'll get it figured out. Also report to the golf shop if any extra carts that are left at the starting tee. Want to make sure we can get those back to them. They usually appreciate it and not having to track down carts, or if we have a really full field that day or a double wave, they need them back so that they can charge them. So it's always good to kind of keep tabs on that and keep the first tee area clear. So here's where we run into some issues when some people are late. So time of starting penalties. Player arrives within 5 minutes after their assigned starting time. The penalty for failure to start on time is going to be for individual match play. It's going to be loss of hole. So that player B shows up 2 minutes late. You say you've lost this hole. Go ahead and walk to number 2, whatever that second hole that they're playing is going to be, and they can just keep moving. For individual stroke play, it's going to be 2 strokes if they do show up within that 5 minutes after their official starting time. And then after 5 minutes has elapsed, the penalty is disqualification. So hopefully it doesn't get to that point, but every once in a while you do have someone that doesn't show up. So again, we'll try to keep you guys in as fast and quickly as possible if anyone isn't showing up that day. So when is a player considered to be late for his starting time? When the official clock has turned to the assigned starting time. So their starting time is 8 a.m. and the player is going to be late when the clock turns from 7:59 to 8. So it's a matter of a second right there, and just want to make sure that we're always keeping tabs on that. So as the starter, you've given the players their information. You want to make sure that you're always keeping an eye on that official clock on the table that we have. And as soon as that clock turns over, if a player isn't there, that begins their 5 minutes from there. So when is a player considered to be late for his starting time? When the official clock has turned to the assigned starting time. So here's an example of another situation where you might run into a delay of the group as a whole. So a player is assigned by the committee to a group with a 9 a.m. starting time. He or she arrives at the first tee at 9:06 a.m. But for whatever reason, whether slow play or a ruling, the starting time has been delayed until after he arrives. What is the ruling? So in this case, since the group was unable to start at the time originally established by the committee and the player arrived before it could do so, the player is in breach of Rule 5.3. There's not, sorry, yes. Sorry. Yes, correct. Yeah. All right, and next we'll have Tom Roth come up here to talk a little bit about scoring duties. Sorry. All right. Scoring. So the officials who assist in scoring play a very important role. Many discrepancies and disqualifications could arise, and we need to make sure we get it right. It is the committee's responsibility to define the scoring area and when scorecards are considered returned. So checking scores at CGA and USGA qualifiers are all about qualifying. It's easy as an official to get caught up in the drama of someone close to the cut line. Especially if you know the person, you're sitting in scoring, trying to wait for them. So you don't want to guess or project the cut line. Tell all the players to follow scoring online, and they must be available for a playoff if needed. So I've seen it happen before where someone tells them, oh, I think this is going to be the cut line, and it changes at the last second, and they're already in their car 20 minutes down the road. So don't want to get into a situation where someone isn't there and ready for that playoff because we guessed what the projected cut line might be. So some players like to know the cut, some would prefer not to know. So we don't want to be in the business of kind of setting those results or expectations for that player. So we want to make sure we're asking if the players, if anyone played under a second ball rule, 20.1C, or if there were any rulings they needed to be decided. So again, having them talk about every little detail that happened, just want to make sure that they took the correct ruling and followed every procedure. Also want to ask players to remain in the scoring area while you check and add up the scorecards. It's another issue where they want to leave really quickly, get to lunch, they're tired, but it's really important that when they're in the scoring area, we get that figured out for them. Again, one thing that's nice about computers nowadays is that they add the scores for us. So our biggest role as a scorer is to make sure that we get the whole holds correct. So you don't have to worry about the math, but make sure 1 through 18 all add up for the day. Want to make sure that both the competitor and the marker have signed the scorecard. So 2 signatures and make a check mark by each name. It's easy to check it off that way so we know every score has been entered for that day. The competitor is responsible for his hole by hole scores. So make sure that they, review it. A lot of times they toss it in. I've seen it happen at every level, junior girls, boys, men, women. And they're not too happy when they come back and tell you that you put it in wrong and you show them the scorecard they signed and they signed for a higher score or a lower score, and it's even worse, the result. So just want to make sure that we're helping them as much as possible when they're in the scoring area to make sure they've signed for the correct score for that day. So the committee is going to be responsible for the 9-hole and 18-hole totals in net events, so properly applying any handicap strokes received. Also 4-ball stroke play scores must be individually identifiable. So make sure they've listed those all for on those scorecards. So if we need to look back at anything, we can look back. All right. Next, we have Tom Roth talk about pace of play. Oh, yeah.
Does the golf teams have the thing that is projected cut line?
Yeah, so if it's an event that has a cut in the back end, we will put it on there. So if it's day 2, there's a cut before round 3. When those scores start coming in, it'll start doing math and start having a trajectory cut line. So when you tell the player to look for, you can, when you tell them to look online, it'll show them so they can keep tabs, maybe it's +2 for the day.
Get somebody in the group.
Yep, so they can either go online to the CGA website or if they have the leaderboard on their phone, they should be able to see it. Yep.
All right, hello, everybody. See a lot of familiar faces out here in the crowd. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Tom Roth. I'm a tournament manager here at CGA. So we'll get into our pace of play practices and policies here. Pace of play is obviously very important at all of our tournaments. We want to make sure all of our players are keeping up with those groups in front of them, playing at a proper pace. So we'll just get started here. So a few of our best practices for our pace of play. It is very important, but also it can be difficult to manage at times. Lots of personalities and interpretations of what is a good pace of play. Pace of play guidelines will be provided by the CGA. So every time you show up to a tournament, when you get to your cart in your morning, you will have our pace of play sheet or our Raguzi sheet in your card waiting for you. So you have all the pace of play parameters for all of our groups for that day. So when to talk to groups about pace of play, be proactive but not aggressive. Look at all the factors before speaking to groups. Where's the group ahead of them? If they had any long rulings or any ball searches. So there's a lot of factors and things that go into managing the pace of play when we're out on the course. You never want to talk to a group about their pace of play during a hole. We either want to do it before they start a hole or if they're coming off a green, make sure to mention if they have any pace of play issues. You just never want to mention to the while they're playing that hole that they're on. And then keep in constant contact with the OIC about any groups that are out of position, or if you feel like there's any groups that we should talk to or keep an eye on. Just make sure you communicate with us, any of those groups, and we'll relay to everybody else just to make sure we're all aware of those groups and make sure that they're either keeping up with that group in front of them or trying to close the gap to that group. So just make sure you're in constant communication with us about any pace of play issues that you may have. So we have a few do's and do nots as far as pace of play. So our first do, make notes of any rulings, ball searches, or other factors that might affect a group's position on the course that you observe. Do not approach a group during the play of a hole to tell them to speed up or they will be timed. Do not mention pace of play at all to a group if there is not a problem with that group's pace of play. Do you pay attention to all factors, including the position of the group in front of them, any lengthy rulings, ball searches, before you start timing any groups? Do you stay with the group at a distance is preferred to help them improve their pace of play available. Make sure you're available for any rulings, ball searches. Just give them that extra set of eyes if they need it to try and help get them back on a proper pace of play for us. And then don't visibly use a stopwatch to time players. If you need to time a player, do so discreetly from a distance. And don't continuously pester a group that has fallen behind on pace of play. Just do your best to help them get back in position and move on. So officiating pace of play. Pace of play falls under Rule 5.6. On-course officials spend the majority of their time dealing or concerned with pace of play. There are several different pace of play systems. The CGA uses the group time and position system. And then no matter what system is used, it is only useful if the policy is followed. So next we'll get into talking about closing the gap. So closing the gap is a misconception, has been that the allotted time is the pace they should play, when actually it is the maximum amount of time a group is given prior to implementing pace of play time procedures and penalties. And then therefore at CGA events, we will speak to out of position groups and ask them to close the gap, even if they are under that allotted time given to play a specific hole or just behind their time for their round in general. Our goal is to be proactive in helping groups stay in position and under the maximum time. And then we have found that once groups fall out of position and over the allotted time, it is tough. It is a tough task to get them back in position with that group in front of them. This will be a friendly reminder to keep position with the group in front of them, and it is not our first official warning. So what is out of position for a group? A group is considered out of position if at any time during the round a group is behind the prescribed pace of play time on their scorecard or their Raguzzi's. So that Raguzzi is that pace of play sheet that lists all the time pars for holes for all of our groups. And then players, when we give them that scorecard and starting, their pace of play for each hole is listed on that scorecard as well. And then once they have fallen behind or fallen out of position, please give them a friendly reminder that they have fallen out of position and do their best to try and catch up to that group in front of them. Once you do give them that friendly reminder, leave the group, give them a couple holes to try and get back up with that group in front of them, and then make sure to check on their position after a few holes have passed. And then we need our first groups to play a few holes to establish our pace of play for the day. So once those first groups get started, we can start really focusing on our pace of play for the day. But we need those first few groups to get a few holes in to establish our pace for the rest of the field. So any following groups will be considered out of position when they're over the prescribed time, and if they reach a par 3 that is clear of all play, and all players in the preceding group have played their strokes from the tee area on the next hole. The group reaches a par 4, which is not clear of all play, but which becomes clear of all play before all players in the group have played their strokes from the tee area. So if the group gets to the tee area and the group in front of them is walking off the green and all of those players have not hit their tee shots to start that hole, that means they are out of position. And then a group reaches a par 5 and the group in front of them is on the putting green. And then group reaches a par 5 or par 4, which is totally clear of play. And there are no groups in front of them. They can't see that group in front of them. They are out of position. And we are going to want to talk to them and make sure they're doing everything they can to catch up to that group in front of them. And then we have a little script you can follow here. So when you go up to a group, you can just tell them your group is out over the allotted time and you are out of position with that group in front of you. Please work to get back into position by a certain hole. And then we usually give them 2 or 3 holes to catch up, and then always just be polite and give them a thank you after. And then make sure once you go around again, talk to them again, see if they're still behind. And if not, we'll get into what we need to do to get that group moving a little faster. And like I said, make sure to leave the group, give them a few holes, and then recheck their position after a few holes. So the goal is to help groups not reach the point where they may be timed and subject to penalty. So some common sense will be needed here. Obviously, there may be a few tournaments where we don't have full groups. So obviously, it's going to take a 2-some a little quicker to play a few holes than a 3-some, or a 3-some play a little quicker than a 4-some. So obviously, you have to make sure you're taking that into consideration while you're monitoring pace of play out in the course as well. Be gentle in your delivery to avoid possible confrontation with any players. And then all players may not be appreciative of our efforts to try and get our groups moving a little quicker here. And then do not mention pace of play to groups if there are no pace of play issues. So this is just what our pace of play sheet looks like. So when you get to the course for our tournament day, you'll find one of these sheets in your cart for you. So make sure you have that. And there's a few spots on here. If you have any issues, you can mark down our time over par for any groups. If you're following them for a few holes, you can keep track of the holes and see if they've made up any time as they play through those holes. So still with officiating pace of play checklist once we start timing players. So one is to note their starting time when they started their round. Our second one is their overall time. How long does it take them to get to this point? That's very important just to see how long it's taken them for their overall time par. Their position relative to that group in front of them. Like I said before, make sure they're keeping up with that group in front of them. Our good rule of thumb is if they can't see that group in front of them, then they're out of position. Or like I said, if any of those holes are cleared, they're obviously out of position as well. The spread of the field around the golf course, if there's any backups anywhere, we're going to want to take that into effect or into consideration. And then inform a group and start timing individuals. So if there are any pace of play issues, they are assigned to individual players, not the group as a whole. So we want to make sure we inform the group that we are timing them, and then time individual players, not the group as a whole. So a player has 40 seconds to make a stroke period. They are not given any extra time. There's no grace period or margin of error given to players, whether they are the first or last player to play. Each player has 40 seconds to play. And right when it's their turn to play, that 40 seconds kicks in, and they do not get any more time than that 40 seconds. So our pace of play policy for stroke play. First, you want to notify all the groups all the players in the group that they are out of position and behind the allotted pace of play. So if we find our first bad time for that group, we want to give all the group individuals a warning. If they have a second bad time, then that incurs a 1-stroke penalty. If we have a third bad time, that brings into a 2-stroke penalty. And then a third bad time, they will be disqualified. And then for match play, once again, make sure to notify all the players in that match that they are out of position and over their allotted time. So our first bad time is a warning again. Our second bad time is a 1-stroke penalty. And then our third bad time is a loss of hole penalty. And then our fourth bad time as well is disqualification. So then we have this question here. So now that we have determined that a group is out of position, how and when should we speak to that group? So prior to starting the hole or after all players have played from the team area, inform that group that they are behind time or being timed, and then also tell them that you are there to assist them to get back in position. You're spotting balls for them. You can help them rake bunkers, anything to help get them back in position. You are there to help them. Make sure that you know you are there to help. Explain the timing procedures to them if needed. And then ask them if they have any questions. You never want to approach player while they're still on the putting green. We want to give them their time on the putting green. But once they start walking off, make sure you let them know that they are being timed and that their group is, we are monitoring their group's pace of play. Use good judgment. Do not be confrontational with any players. Stay with that group until they are back into position and make sure you continue timing them. And then inform players when they are back in position. And then once that group is back in position, tell the players thank you for regaining their position and ask them to keep pace for the remainder of the round. And then a pace of play warning remains with a player throughout the tournament. It does not start over after regaining position or at the end of their round. All right, so that is everything with pace of play. I will hand it over to Hogan May to go over match play.
Question.
Yep.
You guys keep statistics on how often pace of play penalties are out?
We do not actually.
Yeah.
I have never given one. I'm not sure if anybody else has ever. You have?
Yeah, we have, and I mean, we know players traditionally that are famous for whatever they're famous for. And in our one day, we started kind of a program of putting names.
Yeah,
that's the
watch list.
Towards that, but we don't actually have stats, Bob or whoever has that.
Yeah.
Didn't have any penalties we gave out this year, how many warnings, again, we don't want to do that, we want to prevent it before it gets there and keep it before we have to give those penalties, but we're gonna talk about time to see how that, keeping track of them, but it's very few penalties every year.
A question on pace of play. With the USGA somewhat relaxing and clarifying the rule on replacing damaged plugs. On our hard part, are we going to come up with something that gives us a guideline on replacing damaged plugs and its impact on pace of play?
Chris will handle the hard part a little bit, so we will address that there, yes, sir.
I was noticing that what was issued, nothing was mentioned. Yeah, that's something that's forthcoming, so we can consistently do it throughout.
Yeah, I mean, we'll cover you on the hard part, whatever. We're not gonna limit when you can replace it, so, you have a damaged plug, you're gonna be able to replace that plug, and move on there. So we're not gonna put any special local rules in to say that you can't replace this plug or that plug or the type of damage it is.
But we're not going to do a type of time limit of 3 minutes, 5 minutes, 8 minutes, or anything of that order.
No, not specifically, no, sir. I mean, I think it covers the rules out there, reasonably delayed play, or, you're not allowed to unreasonably delay play in that transaction of changing the plug. Yes, sir.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. No worries.
We call it spade meter.
Repeat the question.
So in this question, you're talking to a player and maybe a spectator, whether it's a parent, friend, or whatever, wants to get involved. And hey, this player's not slow, it's player B, C, and D, And any of those situations, we try to tell them, we're talking to the players, we're working with the player, and the side that's involved in the round there. So we just try to tell them, we're dealing with the players. Thanks for your feedback, but we'll handle it with them. So, basically just keep them out of it. Thanks for your input and the feedback. And the timing will tell us who's the problem. But yeah, I mean, if you ever deal with a challenging situation with a spectator, don't feel like you need to take it on your own. Call whoever the official in charge is. We'll definitely, we don't want y'all to take any undue heat for what you're doing out there. So we'll handle that or take that in that case. No.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you all for being here today, and if you were here last night, thank you for being here to celebrate our champions from last year. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Hogan May. Been here just over a year now with the CGA and one of our tournament managers, and I also have the pleasure of running the inter-club program. So if any of you play in that, thank you for your participation in that. But I want to go over how to officiate match play. So some of you may know, or most of you may know, match play is very different from stroke play. So in match play, it is just one side competing against another side. In stroke play, it's that individual player playing against the entire field. So in match play, it can be a one-on-one situation, or in some instances, a two-on-two situation. So in match play, the game is played by holes. It's not necessarily a round, because a match could technically end at any given point in time should a concession be given throughout the match. Except as otherwise provided in the rules, a hole is won by the side that holds the ball, or holds its ball in the fewest amount of strokes. And there are a few exceptions to that, which we'll get into. And then one thing we do as officials in match play is, after the completion of each hole, we'll always state the current status of the match. So Jack Nance is 1 up through 1. Let's say Jack Nance is 1 up through 1 over Rusty Hart. Or if they're tied through 1, we'll say that, and we'll also let them know how many holes there are remaining to be played, because we just want them focusing on their game, and we'll take care of the scoring and the match status for them. And in match play, the general penalty is a loss of hole. We know this in stroke play as a 2-stroke penalty, but in match play, it is the loss of a hole. So one type of as an official in match play is being an observer. So you are appointed by the committee, by us, to assist the referee who is appointed to that specific match. And you're just there to help decide questions of fact. And if you see any rules violations that are out going on, you let that referee know. You're just there as an extra set of eyes. A few things you should not do. You don't need to attend the flag stick. That's the caddy's responsibility. You don't need to mark the position of the hole or anybody's ball for any reasons. You don't need to do anything like that. The player and or their caddy will take care of that. And we don't use many observers at CGA events. If anything, we'll just use a referee for one match. And if we have enough of you out there at that specific match play tournament, then we'll have you out there to be an extra set of eyes, because it never hurts, especially if you're at a course where they have a lot of blind tee shots, blind landing zones. So the observer is always good for that. And just a few duties of the observer. I kind of just hinted on this, kind of staying ahead, keeping an eye out for tee shots. If a hole's got a pond at the bottom and they don't know that, what their ball may do when they get over that hill, it's good to be down there to let them know if they enter that penalty area or wherever their ball may end up. And we've talked about this earlier, but just positioning yourself in a good area where you're invisible, but yet still visible, to where you can see balls come to rest anywhere on the course or off the course should it get out of bounds. And you're also there just to help the referee determine order of play and, as I've said, where balls enter penalty areas. So, as I've said, there are 2 types of the officials: observers, which we just covered, and now referees. So, your first objective before a match begins is you want to introduce yourself to the players, and if they have any caddies, introduce yourself to them as well. And if you are officiating or refereeing, I should say, a match that has some seasoned veterans, so seasoned players. So if you're in a situation, if you're doing the North-South match, Ryder Cup, even these guys have been doing this for a long time, or ladies, they've been doing it for a while. All you have to do is just ask them to identify their golf ball and to just, would you count all your clubs in your bag? Because they know how match play works. There's no need to get into the nitty gritty of it with them. It's just get these 2 things out of the way, introduce yourself, and let's play ball. So if you're refereeing some less experienced golfers in match play specifically, it's always good to just ask them if they're familiar with the match play rules. And if somebody says that they're not, it's good to just quickly refresh their minds on that so they can have it in mind, but also, just let them know that you're there to assist with any of those types of rulings. So if necessary, you'll obviously go over those first 2 things, whether they're seasoned or not, identifying their golf balls, making sure they don't have too many clubs in their bag. But just let them know that you're always there to help determine questions of fact, to assure that play is in accordance with the rules, to make sure nobody's out here cheating and breaking the rules when we've got our backs turned. And kind of stemming from that, just to prevent any breaches. So if you see somebody getting ready to do something incorrect, try and intervene before they start doing that. As we said earlier, if you see somebody getting ready to tee it up in the teeing area and it's outside the teeing area, just go ahead and tell them before they do it instead of waiting until after. So they're just to be assistants, looking for balls. If they're on the putting green and they're not sure who's away, you're there off to the side to help assist and determine that, and who would have the honor there. And also just to make sure that concessions are loud and clear. That's arguably one of the most important things of match play. Sometimes there may be instances where a player thought he heard or saw a gesture that indicated that the next stroke is good or the hole's over. So you just want to make sure that you notice that all concessions, whether they're verbal or non-verbal, are clear. So rule 3.2B is the concessions of in match play of the match, I'm sorry, the hole or the next stroke. So a player can concede a match at any time prior to the start of or conclusion of that match. So if they get to the first tee and they just have a bad feeling that they don't have it today, they had a bad range session, and they said, I'm just gonna go ahead and drive home. Have a good day, good luck. So the player can certainly do that, or if at any point in the match, should they unfortunately become injured or something, they can concede the match. The player can concede a hole at any time prior to the start of the hole or conclusion of the hole. They get to a tee box and they have never made better than double bogey on that hole. They might just say, let's go on to the next. I'm not going to waste our time. So they can certainly do that. And as we all obviously know, a player can concede their opponent's next stroke at any time. And the opponent is considered to have holed out with their next stroke, and the ball may be removed by either side, but a concession when a player has made a verbal or non-verbal concession that cannot be taken back. Once you say that's good, and then you could be turned around and say that's good, and then they turn back around and notice they actually have a 15-foot putt. If they said it, it is what it is. You can't take it back. So some more objectives as the referee of match play. You always want to stay with the group, but give them enough space. If you have an observer, then your observer would be in front of the group, so you would just want to stay back behind the group a good little ways, just so you're not in their way, intervening with their shots and decision making. Practice preventative officiating equally for both sides. We've hinted on this a couple of times. You don't want to try and show favoritism for a player who's been around since they've been a junior, and then they're playing against somebody who's new to the Carolinas and you don't know who that is. We want to make sure we're paying attention equally to everybody and making sure that we're trying to catch any potential rules violations. So as we said before, we want to be in a good position to watch for any improper dropping techniques. If they go to play another ball without stating its purpose, if they are clearly not indicating that they're getting ready to play a provisional or whatever, we want to make sure we're there to notice that. And if anybody is playing out of turn, if it's clearly on the putting green, one guy is significantly closer than the other, and the guy who's closer is getting ready to go first, you want to intervene there. And also, as we talked about, from playing outside of the team area, there's no sense in just waiting until they do that and give them the penalty should that be necessary. Just nip it in the butt before you can. And if any ball markers that have been moved are not moved back properly, such as if we're taking 2 putter head lengths away just to get out of somebody's line and then not putting it back on that, and you notice it, step in and let them know that we got to fix that before we make our next stroke. And also, you want to be in a good spot to hear or see any concessions that are made. So as a referee, we will assist with looking for balls, but do not go into bunkers at any time unless you're happening to assist looking for a ball. And don't go on to the putting green at any time unless you're assisting with a ruling. If they're reading their putts and whatnot, just stay off the putting green in good ways, just so you're in a good angle so you can see what's going on, but not close enough to where you're in the way. So going off some more objectives, so we want to be there to decide questions of fact, where a ball may or may not have crossed into a penalty area. So we want to apply the rules fairly to whether it's just 2 players in the match or if it's 4, 2 versus 2. We want to apply everything fairly to everybody on either side in the match. And obviously we want to do everything that's not contrary, but just in the spirit of the game. And obviously we want to keep our eyes peeled. We don't want to be checking Facebook or checking the score of the Super Bowl and getting distracted, and then we may miss something that's going on. So we want to always have our eyes peeled and paying attention to both players or all 4 if it's a 2 versus 2 match play. And as always, as we've hinted on throughout this, we always want to be very respectful to the players. we don't want to be overbearing. They're in most likely a pretty stressful situation, and they're trying their best to do everything the right way. And sometimes the rules of golf are the last thing on their mind. So that's why we're there to just help them and do it in a respectful and polite way. And another quote from our good friend Richard Tufts: "A brisk or officious handling of a situation can, by upsetting the player, magnify the effect of a penalty far beyond the extent of the penalty itself." So somebody can just get frustrated at themselves for, getting a silly penalty, but it's the way you handle it that could, help them forget about it and move on and turn things around, start playing well, or it'll linger in their mind the rest of the day and the rest of the drive home. And as always, should you need it, just call for backup on your radio, give the official in charge a call. There are other officials at the course, and somebody's close by can come assist you. Just get on that radio and hit the Mayday button. And keep conversations to a minimum with the players and their caddies and spectators. We want the players and their caddies obviously to stay focused and pay attention to the task at hand. We don't need to intervene, but if somebody wants to chat it up with you, feel free to chat it up with them if that makes them feel a little more comfortable in the tense situation. And after each hole, you want to announce the status of the match. So, and you want to write down the scores. It's good to have that. But this is very important for posting purposes when we do that afterwards. But it's also just good to know throughout the day what the match is at. If player's parent comes up, or the spectator comes up, hey, what's the match at right now? You can just pull out the scorecard of your pocket and just let them know real quick. So, for example, we'll have Dustin Johnson and Jason Day playing in a match. So to start the match, Dustin had the honor on the first hole. So no matter what, at any point in the match, you can be on the 11th hole, the 17th hole. Whenever you are announcing the status of the match, Dustin's name would come first. So whoever is teeing off first, just keep that in mind. They will be the first name. So you do the player A score, and the player B score, and the status of the match. So Dustin Johnson 4, Jason Day 5. Status of the match is 1-up Dustin Johnson, just as an example. Now I'm going to hand it over to the man himself, Chris Zhang, to go over the hard part.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Chris Day. I want to reiterate what everybody said. Thank you for everything you all do. We had our board meeting yesterday. A lot of numbers were thrown around, and as a staff, we do a lot of tournaments, and we do them with you all. So compliments to you all for all you do for us. Really, we're one of the biggest associations out there, and it's a lot of work, but it's a lot of fun with you all out there. I don't know if Brian's still here. I want to thank him for what they've done with the rules of golf. I know when I first started the rules of golf, I guess it would have been 2007 or 8. I loved the rules of golf. Then I started hating the rules of golf because we were getting all those penalties all the time. And I'm starting to love them again. I think they did a great job when they rewrote them. They made them friendly and player friendly, and we're getting less penalties. So I'm thankful for that. We'll go over our hard card. We're not going to go to the USGA hard card, but I do want you all to know that when you work in a USGA qualifier, it will be different than this one. Okay, we follow the USGA hard card at USGA rules or at USGA qualifying. So make sure you know when you show up at a USGA qualifier to pull out the hard card. So a few things on here: spectator, caddy policies. We just went ahead and said, look at the entry form. It's a little different for each event. And junior events, TYGA events, we stopped allowing caddies completely. It's one of the best decisions we made. But each event will have different information on that. Some of the things I wish they would have done is gone ahead and made these rules, listed conforming driver heads, 1 ball rule, listed conforming golf balls. For those of you new, we don't really have to worry about any of these things. A lot of our players aren't getting the newest driver heads from the manufacturers yet. They're getting tested before they get to our hands. And then metal spikes are still in there. You can't wear metal spikes. The resolving rules issues during a round, so we have that in there. We put that in there for the players so they can kind of figure out what they need to do. And 20.1C3, you should all learn that, especially for the rules test. We have that of bounds on here. We just put on there. The main thing is that we use a lot of roads. in all of our events mainly. I know some courts at Pinehurst don't use roads, but a lot of our events, we use them as out of bounds. So if it goes on another part of the course, that is still out of bounds. So that NLR A5. And then penalty areas, extended infinity, when penalty area is connected to out of bounds edge, the penalty area extends to the code size and out of bounds. And we don't have any pictures of that, but if you're fishing a course you've never been to before, it's always a good idea to zoom around the course and check with the course marking. Or the official in charge about the course marking. I think Brian touched on that relief on opposite side of red penalty area, coincide with out of bounds. Number 6, we use that. We keep that on our hard card. So anytime that we use red penalty areas out of bounds, we're going to let you use that opposite margin rule. And then relief from seams of cut turf. That is live ball and area of intended swing is what we use there for F7. So that is not stance. We do not get relief from stance on seams of cut turf. White lines that are connected to artificially surf paths. So we sometimes will extend area abnormal course condition with some white lines. Flower beds we kind of keep on there, just try to keep our gloves happy, not playing from flower beds. Integral objects, that's kind of standard. You'll see that on any hard card, NCAA or any other events that you officiate. And then temporary removal obstructions. Do we do, say, CJ signage such as pole signposts, banners, T signs? They can be movable obstructions. I think Brian even said some things. Somebody asked, like, what's movable for you? What's movable for somebody else is a little different. So Rusty went in there and said also that it's not really movable, that we'll consider it a TIO. So we kind of let you play choosies a little bit with that. So that's important to note. And then ball deflected by power lines on there. We're going to replay that stroke. I think a lot of you probably been to rule school already know that we don't DQ you, but you do get a penalty if you do not replay the shots. So that's good to know. That immovable obstruction close to putting green. We always say that's a 2+2 rule. You'll hear that a lot if you're a new official. Are we playing 2+2? We play that on all of us CGA events. I'm pretty sure we add it to the front side of USGA qualifying, if I'm correct, right? You guys pretty much add that. So pretty much any event that you officiate with CGA, we put that on there. And then relief from aeration holes. I'm still not sure why this has to be a local rule, why this isn't just in the rules of golf, but we still have to drop if we're out in the general area and then place if we're on the putting green. And then pace of play. One thing that Tom, you did a great job talking about pace of play. If you're at one of my events, I want to know everything that's going on. I'm pretty hard on pace of play. I think we need to do a better job communicating on pace of play. If Joe tells somebody on the front side to speed up, we need the backside officials to know that we've already talked to that group and that group's already been one. So don't be afraid to get on the radio and start telling us. I try to make notes on my pace of play sheet. You should too. Hey, here's a little star. Joe talked to him on this hole. This is how far they were behind. We need to do a good job with that because sometimes these players do a good job getting back in position and we should tell them, hey, you're back in position. Great job. But I think it's important communication wise that we're all working there together. I think that's something that we lost with some of the radio chatter. Sometimes can't hear each other, but if we start group chats, we need to communicate with the official charge so they can communicate. So we're not yelling at the same group 4 different times and they've never done anything. So communicate on pace of play as much as possible. Stopping and resuming play, that's pretty basic. And then rounds, championships, we do 18 holes and then qualifying rounds are 2 9-hole rounds. We put that on there. We did add the new local rule L1. Rusty decided that. No, I think we all decided that together. So that is on there. So we're friendly now at CJ. Like everybody said, we don't want to penalize you. And then when competition is final is when we get that trophy out. So ground under repair is kind of area circle white line. This might be something you're going to see on the front side, not the hard card. Some things that we'll see on the local rule sheet that we often put on there. We'll put on there if we circle big areas, and then obstructions are oftentimes on the front side of the rule sheet. And then we like to add no play zones or if we're playing preferred lies. Sometimes it's not going to be on there if we're playing preferred lies. We printed the rule sheet already, and then all of a sudden we got thunderstorms at night, and then now we need to play preferred lies. But we do try to get it on there if we can, and we know we're going to play it. But always we can change that and tell the players on the first tee. But that's important for starting. Like Killian said, you're the ones there telling them the rules for the day. We need to make sure we get that right. Some other things you might see in the local rules, sandy areas are part of the general area, especially here in the sand hills. We'll put drop zones on there. And then some other things you might see are junior events. If we say you can, we allow spectators, as we like to say, shuttle from pole to pole. That's one thing we're trying not to say anymore as parents. So when you're involved in a ruling, the spectators, this spectator saw this, this spectator saw this. So it's not, well, Killing's dad said this happened, and then it's like, well, I don't really care. It was her dad that said it. But so some of the other things that you might see on the local sheet there, especially USJ qualifiers, players have to walk at all times, unless I think senior open qualifying will let you ride. All right. I think we got just one last rules. Did you want to do a 5-minute break, or if anybody just needs to get up and go and let Maggie just go ahead and crush it? All right, Maggie's ready. You got 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 5-minute break's over. Yeah. No, we don't gamble.
Always good to have your rules book handy. All right, we're gonna briefly here go through Rule 20. This is the last thing we're gonna talk about today. So once we get through this, we can all go home and cheer on the Chiefs. I saw an Eagles shirt earlier. I thought I would get a better reaction from him. All right. Rule 20, the reason we're kind of going over that this afternoon is because it does deal a lot with officiating and making those decisions when there is a rules issue during play. So Rule 20 is going to be all about resolving those rules issues, rulings on issues under the rules, and situations not covered by the rules. All right. Kind of scroll through this. Match play rules issues. Deciding how we're going to decide those match play rules issues, what the players are going to need to think about when deciding those issues, and how we as officials and referees are going to have to decide those issues. In stroke play, which is the majority of our competitions, players do not have the right to decide issues by agreement. They're going to be playing 2 balls when uncertain what to do, which you can't do during match play. And then we're going to talk about how the committee decides which ball counts when they do play those 2 balls. Rulings are made by the referee or by the committee. We're going to talk about, we're actually not going to talk about applying the naked eye standard today, but that is covered in this rule. We're going to talk about when wrong rulings can be corrected and when they can't, and how you disqualify a player after a match or when the competition is final. We're also going to talk a little bit about what to do when a situation is not specifically covered by the rules. All right, the purpose of this rule, Rule 20 covers what players should do when they have questions about the rules during the rounds, including the procedures, which are going to differ sometimes in match play and stroke play, and allowing the player to protect the right to get a ruling at a later time. Obviously, as officials, we can't be everywhere all the time. Almost always we're not exactly where somebody needs us to be, right? So figuring out how to get those players a ruling. This rule is also going to cover the role of referees and who is authorized to decide questions of fact and apply the rules, which again might be different in match play and stroke play. Rulings from a referee or the committee are binding on all players, which is important because we do need to have kind of that final say. All right, going straight into 20.1. Players must avoid unreasonable delay. So when players are seeking help with the rules, they must avoid an unreasonable delay. If a referee or the committee is not available in a reasonable time to help with a rules issue, the player needs to decide what to do and play on. The player may protect their rights by asking for a ruling in match play or by playing 2 balls in stroke play. So the player can also ask for a ruling in stroke play, of course, They can request a ruling from a referee or rules official on the course. But if somebody can't get there right away, they do not have the right to just completely stop play in their tracks, hold up 6 groups on the tee behind them, waiting for one of our 3 referees that may be there that day to get out on the course. So they need to go ahead and play 2 balls, trying to figure out what to do if it's a stroke play competition. All right, rules, issues, and match play. Typically, players should be deciding their issues by agreement. So during a round, the players in a match agree how to decide a rules issue. The agreed upon outcome is conclusive, even if it turns out to have been wrong under the rules. All right, so this player says I dropped 2 club links from the cart path on the right hole. That's right, isn't it? And his opponent says, yeah, that's how I do it. That's fine. They agreed to that. They're moving on. They both thought that's what they were supposed to do. So they keep going, and that agreed upon outcome is conclusive, even if later in the day, it comes up that, oh shoot, I wasn't necessarily supposed to take those 2 club links from there. So this is going to be the case as long as the players did not agree to ignore any rule or penalty that they knew applied. So the main point here, you can get bogged down in this, but the main point here is the 2 players cannot agree, have a conversation where somebody says, I know this is a penalty, but I'm not going to apply it, if that's okay with you. And then the other player says, sure, that's no problem. It didn't help you anyway. No penalty here. So once that conversation has happened, that is no good. And those 2 players are agreeing to waive a rule, and they're going to get a pretty severe penalty of disqualification. If a referee is assigned to the match, that referee must rule on any issue that comes to their attention in time, and the players must follow that ruling. So if you're out there acting as a referee for a match, it is your responsibility to be paying very, very close attention to what's going on, because you are the person who's going to be calling either of those 2 players on any rules issues that may come up. In the absence of a referee, if the players do not agree or have doubt about how the rules apply, either player may request a ruling under 20.1(b)(2). Now we're going to talk about 2 different times of when the players are requesting a ruling. So the first is the ruling request is made before the result of the match is final. So when a player wants a referee or the committee to decide how to apply the rules to play for their own play or their opponent's play, the player may request a ruling. If a referee or the committee is not available in a reasonable amount of time, the player may request a ruling by notifying the opponent that a later ruling will be sought when a referee or the committee becomes available. In CGA events, when it's the round of 64, round of 32, things like that, when we maybe don't have 16 officials out there refereeing every single match, this is pretty common. So we may have officials out roaming around, trying to figure, helping out with pace of play and things like that, but also being available if a player does want to make a request for a ruling. In that case, the official gets invited into that match, and that's when this situation is going to take place. But you'll see there's a few things that have to happen for that referee to consider making a ruling. So the player makes a request for a ruling before the result of the match is final. A ruling will only be given if the request is made in time. So in time is going to mean, is going to depend on when the player first becomes aware of the facts creating the rules issue. So when a player becomes aware of the facts, the ruling request must be made before either player makes a stroke to begin another hole. Now this is before the result of the match is final. So before either player makes a stroke on the next hole, they must say, I want to request a ruling.
When player becomes aware of the facts during or after completion of the final hole in the match, the ruling request must be made before the results of the match is final. Okay, if the player does not make this request in time, a ruling will not be given by the referee or the committee, and the result of the holes in question will stand. So if they don't make that request in time, it does not matter what the request is. Whatever happened on those holes will stand, even if the rules were applied in the wrong way. If the player requests a ruling about an earlier hole, a ruling will only be given if all three of the below apply. So first thing, the opponent breached those two things that they really can't breach, which is Rule 3.2 D1, giving the wrong number of strokes taken, and 3.2 D2, failing to tell a player about a penalty. So you told them you had the wrong number of strokes on a hole, or you didn't tell, the opponent didn't tell them about a penalty that happens. So that's the first thing that has to happen to consider a ruling request about an earlier hole. Second thing is going to be the request is based on facts that the player was not aware of before either player made a stroke, either to begin the hole being played or between holes, the hole's just completed. All right, so they breached one of those two things you really can't breach, and the player was not aware of the facts at that time. After becoming aware, the third thing is after becoming aware of these facts, the player makes a request for the ruling in time. Okay, so if a ruling request is made after the result of the match is final, so when a player makes a request for a ruling after the result of the match is final, the committee will give the player a ruling only if both of these two things apply. First is the request is based on facts the player was not aware of before the result of the match is final. And you'll see this again, the opponent breached those two things that they can't breach, which is wrong number of strokes taken or failing to tell the player about a penalty. They're also gonna have, it's also gonna have to be that the opponent knew of the breach before the match was final. So the opponent knew they weren't supposed to do it, and the request is based on facts that the player was not aware of before the result of the match was final. There is no time limit on giving such a ruling. This is the type of thing that if this happens, the OIC at a CGA event is definitely going to be involved in this. And, if you're the official that takes that initial request, the first thing you're going to do is get on the radio and say, Maggie, we have a problem. All right. So in match play, unlike stroke play, there is no right to play two balls. So any player who's uncertain about the right procedure in a match is not allowed to play out the hole with two balls. So that's only going to be in stroke play. If the referee or committee is not available in a, we're going to skip on stroke play. We'll have a question slide here in a few minutes. We're going to skip on to rules issues in stroke play, which we're all probably very familiar with. So first thing, unlike match play, there is no right to decide rules issued by agreement. I think we have all come up on a group who is deciding to take ground and repair relief or something like that and says, yeah, everybody in the group, we all decided that was ground and repair, so I just dropped right here. So that's a misconception that players a lot of times don't understand, that they don't get to just decide within their group a rules issue. They do need to consult with a referee or the committee. But if a referee or committee is not available in a reasonable time to help with a rules issue, the players are encouraged to help each other in applying the rules, but they have no right to decide it by agreement, and any such agreement that they make is not binding on any player, the referee, or the committee. So just because the other player in my group said, yeah, it looks like ground under repair, go ahead and take relief, that does not make it ground under repair. Players should raise any rules issues with the committee before returning their scorecard. To protect all the interests of all other players, if player knows or believes that another player has breached or might have breached the rules, and that the other player does not recognize, or ignoring this, the player should tell the other player, the player's marker, a referee, or the committee. This is one of those situations where somebody in the group knows that somebody did something that they weren't supposed to do. We see this in junior golf, more so, I think, than adults who are able to kind of have that hard conversation with the other people in their group. Sometimes it's difficult to call a penalty on somebody, but if a player knows that they may have that another player may have breached something, they should tell that player, the player's marker, the referee, and definitely the committee. It should be done promptly after the player becomes aware of the issue, and no later than before the other player returns their scorecard, unless it's not possible to do so. I can't tell you how many times I've been sitting at the scoring table and the group sits down and says, well, on hole 4, she did this. And now we've waited, a lot of holes for that to kind of fester. So try to remind players not to do that, but at least do bring it up, obviously, before that scorecard gets returned. If the player fails to do so, so if a player who knows there was a breach of the rules fails to bring it up to the committee may disqualify that player under Rule 1.2a. And if it decides this was a serious misconduct, contrary to the spirit of the game. So players are responsible for helping to make the committee aware of any rules breaches that are happening out there on the course. All right. So playing 2 balls and uncertain what to do, a player who's uncertain about the right procedure in stroke play while they're playing a hole may complete the hole with 2 balls without penalty. The player must decide to play the 2 balls after the uncertain situation arises and before making a stroke. So that before making a stroke is a really important point. So they need to decide before they make that stroke. Players should choose which ball will count if the rules allow the procedure used for that ball. So by announcing that choice to their marker or to another player, and again, before making the stroke. So decide to play 2 balls and then announce which ball you would like to count before you make a stroke. If the player does not choose in time, meaning they don't choose before they make a stroke at a ball, then the ball played first is treated as the ball chosen by default. Player must report the facts of the situation to the committee before returning their scorecard, even if the player scores the same with both balls. If they fail to report that to the committee, it's going to be a disqualification penalty. So players who are playing 2 balls must report that to the committee. Now, in a more practical sense for all of you, this could be something that is done on the golf course. So player plays 2 balls on hole number 6, comes up to you in the fairway of hole number 7 and says, hey, back on 6, I played 2 balls. Here's the situation. You as a committee member could make a decision at that moment, if they proceeded correctly, if that ball's going to count, what their score for the hole was, etc. You could figure that out in that moment, and then that would not necessarily mean that they have to bring it up again in the scoring tent. Now the player could, and that would be fine. But if it's a pretty cut and dry situation, especially at a time when they proceeded correctly with the procedure, or if they've scored the same with both balls, that's something that you guys could make that decision out on the golf course. That would fall under this letting the committee know. So that could happen on the golf course, could happen in the scoring area after the round. From a CGA perspective, if that does come up, you're out there, somebody asks you to rule on which of the 2 balls to count, unless it is extremely cut and dry and you know exactly what's going on, we would prefer that you bring that up to us over the radio, just so that we're aware of what's going on. So if the player made a stroke before deciding to play a second ball, the rule is not going to apply at all. And the score that counts is a score with the ball played before the player decided to play a second ball. But the player is not going to get any penalty for going ahead and playing that second ball. Second ball played under this rule is not the same as a provisional ball under Rule 18.3. So when the committee is deciding on the score for the whole, so when the player does play two balls under the rule, the committee will decide the player's score for the whole in this way. So the score with the ball chosen, whether by the player or by default, so by default meaning they made a stroke before picking which ball they wanted to count. The ball chosen counts if the rules allow the procedure used for that ball. So if they choose which ball they want to count, the rules say, yes, you can do that, then that's going to be the score that counts, regardless of whether it's higher or lower than the score with the other ball. If the rules do not allow the procedure used for that ball, meaning the chosen ball, the score with the other ball played counts. If the rules allow the procedure for the other ball. If the rules do not allow the procedures used for either of the two balls, the score with the ball chosen, whether by the player or by default, is going to be the one that counts, unless there is a serious breach in playing that ball from a wrong place, in which case the score with the other ball counts. So the rules are being very friendly here. They're trying to not get a player disqualified if it can be avoided at all costs. If there was a serious breach in playing both balls from a wrong place, there's nowhere to go except home. So the player would be disqualified. All strokes made with the ball that does not count, including strokes made and any penalty strokes solely from playing that ball, do not count in the player's score for the whole. Rules allow the procedure used means that either the original ball was played as it lies and play was allowed from there, or the ball that was played was put in play under the right procedure in the right way in the right place under the rules. Any questions? Move right on. All right. We'll move on to 20.2. Referee is an official named by the committee to decide questions of fact and apply the rules. The referee may get the committee's help before making a ruling on the facts or how the rules apply, and they must be followed by the player. So a referee's ruling must be followed by the player. A player does not have any right to appeal a referee's ruling to the committee, but after a ruling has been made, the referee may get a second opinion from another referee or refer a ruling to the committee for review, but it is not required to do so. At CGA events, sometimes you may come to a player, you give a ruling, that ruling is final, but if the player is really not happy with that ruling, we certainly do not pay you enough to be there and get just really raked over the coals by that player. So you are welcome to bring in a second opinion, whether that's another official on the course, but probably more likely a CGA staff person who can come talk about it and take that heat off of your shoulders. Referee's decision is final, so if the referee authorizes a player to breach a rule in error, the player will not be penalized. But for when a wrong ruling by a referee or the committee will be corrected, we'll talk about that in just a second in 20.2D. When there is no referee to give a ruling, or when a referee refers a ruling to the committee, the ruling will be given by the committee, and the committee's ruling is final. So I think about this as kind of like a club event where you've got the pros at the pro shop, but there may not be any rules officials out roaming around. If there's nobody out there, you just go to the committee, which is usually the head pro there in the pro shop, and his ruling or the ruling of all the pros in there would be final. When the committee can't come to a decision, the committee can refer the issue to the Rules of Golf Committee and the RNA of the USGA, and their decision is also going to be final. All right, we've all done it. Every single person probably in this room has given a wrong ruling. So we're going to talk about some of the things that happen when a wrong ruling is given. So a wrong ruling has occurred when a referee or the committee has attempted to apply the rules, but has done so incorrectly. Examples of wrong rulings are going to include applying a wrong penalty or failing to apply a penalty, applying a rule that does not apply or does not exist. And misinterpreting a rule and applying it incorrectly, probably the most likely. If a ruling by a referee or the committee is later found to be wrong, the ruling will be corrected if possible under the rules. And if it is too late to do so, the wrong ruling stands. If a player takes an action in breach of a rule based on a reasonable misunderstanding of a referee's or the committee's instruction during a round or while play is stopped, there is no penalty and the instruction is treated like a wrong ruling. So if I accidentally tell somebody to do something and it was wrong, or they reasonably misinterpret something that I say, maybe I wasn't very clear, and they do something wrong, that player is not going to be on the hook for my mistake. I highly encourage you. I was looking through all of these when preparing for this slideshow. I highly encourage you to go to section 60. A lot of great information in there about what the committee should do when there has been a wrong ruling. It just gives a lot of really good examples on what to do when something goes wrong. Sometimes there could be administrative mistakes. So an administrative mistake is a procedural error in relation to the administration of the competition. Something like this is probably going to happen by a CGA staff member or the committee at large in charge of an event. And these type of administration mistakes, there's no time limit for correcting such a mistake, even after the result of the match is final or a stroke play competition has closed. An administrative mistake is different from a wrong ruling. So examples of administrative mistakes are going to include miscalculating the result of a tie in stroke play, miscalculating a handicap resulting in the wrong player winning the competition, and awarding a prize to the wrong player after failing to post the winner's score. These are not mistakes that we want to make, but they can happen. In these situations, the mistake should be corrected and the result of the competition should be amended accordingly. We're going to talk a little bit about disqualifying players after the result of the match or competition is final. In match play, there's no time limit on disqualifying a player under Rule 1.2, serious misconduct, or 1.3b, which is deliberately failing to apply a penalty or agreeing with another player to ignore the rules. So again, that agreement we talked about earlier, you decide we're not going to apply it. If we find out about that later, even after the results of the match or the competition is final, we're gonna we can still disqualify that player. For when the committee will give a ruling, when a request is made after the result of the match is final, you're going to refer back to Rule 20.1b3. In stroke play, normally a penalty must not be added or corrected after a stroke play competition has closed, which is when the result becomes final in the way set by the committee, which in a CGA event we just talked about is when we hand out the trophy to the winner. In stroke play qualifying followed by match play, when the first player is teed off to start their first match, that's when the stroke play portion of that competition has closed and a penalty should normally not be added. But a player must be disqualified even after the competition is closed if they do one of these three things: return to score for any hole lower than actually taken. You know what's about to come, except The player is not disqualified if the reason for the lower score is the exclusion of one or more penalty strokes that they didn't know about before the competition closed. Player must be disqualified even after the competition is closed if they knew before the competition had closed that they were in breach of any other rule with a penalty of disqualification, or if they agreed with another player to ignore any rule or penalty they knew applied. So again, can't have that agreement to ignore a rule or penalty. Committee may also disqualify a player under Rule 1.2, serious misconduct, after the competition has closed, same in match play. All right, talk a little bit about situations that are not specifically covered by the rules. So any situation not covered by the rules should be decided by the committee, considering all the circumstances and treating the situation in a way that is reasonable, fair, and consistent with how similar situations are treated under the rules. So every once in a while, something's going to come up that we just don't have a definitive answer for. And this is kind of the catch-all phrase for what to do with that. You're going to treat it in a way that's reasonable, fair, and consistent with how similar situations are treated under the rules. Questions? All right. We're done. Well, thank you guys so much for coming out again. I'll reiterate what every single other person has said. We could not do what we do without the help of all of you. So thank you, and look forward to seeing you guys in 2023.